Welcome in, folks. Chris Temple here with another preview of the upcoming Strategic Investment Insights Conference coming up May 6th and 7th in the outskirts of the Chicago area, Lincolnshire, specifically in the beautiful Lincolnshire Marriott, more specifically. So you see our logo on the screen here. If you've not registered already, please do so before we run out of room, which would be a nice problem for us to have. But we've been getting a lot of interest in this because, as you'll see at the site, this is going to be a mold-breaking investment conference. We're talking about things that appeal to broader numbers of people, things that are in the news right now, the trends that I've explained with the conference. I guess the guy who puts all the nuts and bolts together, really, Eric Verdez. Those of you that haven't seen the video yet, watch that to get the themes. But a lot of things that we're dealing with right now as investors, as citizens, as consumers, that we've literally never lived through. And a lot of these things are going to continue to get worse. They're going to get more interesting, et cetera. One of the areas that we're talking about, of course, is the retreat from globalization and globalized supply chains that was already underway before Russia invaded Ukraine. Now it seems like all of these things are being increased tenfold, and it's adding to the impetus for all of us in the US and Canada, specifically. I would suggest for the Western Hemisphere generally, to start to figure out where our future supplies of all kinds of critical minerals are going to come from. And you've heard about lithium, nickel, cobalt. You've also got lead, zinc, even precious metals to an extent. We don't want to be importing any more of those than we have to. And one of the companies we're going to have there is one of the more explosive exploration stories, I think, ahead. In my view, it's Fireweed Zinc. And I'm joined right now by their CEO, Brandon Macdonald. Brandon, I'm looking forward to seeing you in Chicago.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to being there. It's been, we're not traveling much anymore, so any chance to get out is awesome.
It'll be good. And, folks, those of you that follow me on Twitter, that have followed Brandon and Fireweed Zinc, know that the expression "let's go Brandon" has taken on a new meaning recently, and it has nothing to do with the 46th president. It has to do with the news that these guys have been putting out. And those of you that follow resource exploration specifically will recognize the term porn grade. And when you look at the kind of resource where there's already an existing one from 2018, Brandon, you'll explain, that is one of the most compelling ones in the world for zinc particularly, but also some other base metals. What you've been drilling off recently and adding to an eventual resource update is just mind-blowing. And it's a testimony to how at least a few people are waking up, that you announced a pretty sizable financing recently for a company your size that has been taken up very well. It's pretty well gone about the time you announced it, which is a nice problem to have too. But before we get into the specifics of McMillan Pass and this resource, this asset that you've got, tell us a bit about zinc, because a lot of people, when you watch financial TV and some of even the online advisories on battery metals, zinc is not always the first thing that comes to mind. It's lithium, it's nickel, and so forth. Tell us a bit about zinc and how important it is and why we need to source more of this within North America.
Yeah, I don't think zinc tends to feature high on most people's, lists of future-facing metals, these metals that are critical for, the green revolution or whatever, right? But where people fail to appreciate the impact of zinc is that it's dominantly used for galvanization of steel. So this is really an infrastructure metal, right? If you believe that the US needs to refresh its infrastructure, that China will continue to invest in infrastructure, that the Brazils and Indias, et cetera, will push towards moving out of poverty into middle class and for their populace. All these things require significant infrastructure investment, which means a substantial amount of zinc. And I've told people, if you're an infrastructure bull, you're a zinc bull. You may not have realized it, but you are. So there's some more forward-facing elements of zinc, zinc air batteries, zinc bromide batteries, et cetera, looking at grid scale storage. But really the play is dominated by infrastructure. And I personally think, like, you look coming out of COVID, globally, they're talking 11 trillion plus in stimulus. I mean, Chris, if you want to spend $1 trillion, where do you go? Like it's infrastructure. It's always infrastructure. because you create jobs now building it, and then you create economic benefit in perpetuity as it's used, right? So
Yeah.
that's certainly, you don't want to look for silver clouds on or silver linings on dark clouds too closely, because you don't want to be like a profiteer. But
Right.
certainly when those infrastructure announcements when those stimulus announcements were made, I was like, okay, well, this is big news for zinc.
Well, and we're going to see more of that inevitably. And I've believed for a long time, and we're all going to talk about this at the upcoming conference, is one of the big macro trends that is only beginning. But it's exactly that, Brandon, that as governments have to figure out more and more ways to put to at least some use, these gobs of credit that they've created in the recent past.
Yeah.
It's got to be in things like that are productive. It can't continue to be just handouts so people sit home and buy crazy stocks on Robinhood or play lotto or whatever they do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be put to good use for better paying jobs so that they can extend this whole debt money system at least a while longer. So I completely agree that even if other things continue to bog down, we are going to finally see this long awaited handoff from the outperformance of financial assets and meme stocks and tech stocks, a lot of them with no earnings, to stuff again. That long disconnect between commodity valuations and financial assets is going to close because of this, and I'm sure you're going to benefit from that. Let's get into McMillan Pass specifically, because this already is, from a resource that's now more than 4 years old, a world-class asset that's only going to grow. And it astonishes me in one sense that the market hasn't more completely embraced it, though your share price has held up better recently, because I think a few people are starting to get this than a lot of exploration juniors. But tell us about how you came upon this project in the first place and some of the characteristics of it.
Yeah, the core of the project, we bought off Hudbay. This is a company that they've historically always been a zinc producer. But they went through a series of years where they were changing CEOs pretty frequently, and every CEO wanted to make them a copper company. So this was an asset in a jurisdiction they didn't operate in. It was an asset that was so deep within their sort of back catalog, or whatever you want to call it, that nobody in Hudbay had been to site until they did a site visit with us. So we saw an opportunity there, bought it off them. And, pretty quickly in 2018 showed that the resource was substantially larger than what they thought it was. But that wasn't all what we did. So that was about 50 square kilometers we bought off Hudbay, but we acquired another 900 square kilometers along a major trend in this district, because what we saw was something that we thought that previous people in this area had missed, which is that there was a major sort of, crustal scale deep structure, like a fault, that seemed to be the conduit for the fluids that were producing these deposits. So we had an opportunity to be the first person to assemble the entire district, because it had always had fragmented ownership, and look at it holistically. And so that led to improvements in areas that were outside the resource, like what we call the end zone. But then it led to this kind of discovery/rediscovery of the boundary zone in 2019, and then Boundary West in 2020, which has completely blown the top off the exploration potential here. So we think about that 2018 resource that, as you said, this is one that already measured up as one of the world's largest undeveloped zinc projects. Now we've shown that actually that's just the tip of the iceberg that's emerged, right? And as we explore here and prove it up, like it's abundantly clear that we have the best and biggest zinc project held by a junior. And I think, for context, you talk about, well, when does the market wake up? I always point to the Arizona mining, story, because that was one that they got bought for 2.1 billion Canadian by South 32 in 2018. And that was like $6-ish a share or something like that. You go back 30 months, they were 20 cents a share, right? And people knew they had something when they were 20 cents a share. It was just that, that apathy, no FOMO, like people just, it's like, oh, I'll get to that. Then South 32 got involved, and then they started to pick up speed, and then the FOMO developed, and, next thing you know, you got a 2 billion company. And that's what we hope is what's going to happen to Fireweed, that clearly we have a very high caliber asset. the market's just not aware yet. The smart money's picking away at it and building their positions. But at some point, as the sector rotation occurs, as people get interested in commodities and metals in particular, the standout projects like us are going to be rocket ships.
Well, and I think too, some of it is likely to do with the location. I mean, a lot of people don't look to the Yukon, even resource investors, as a first matter.
Yeah.
But under everybody's nose, the Yukon has been adding infrastructure. There's more and more marquee projects that are there in base metals, and even precious metals, right?
Well, yeah, and you got to, the former Faro mine in Yukon was once the world's largest zinc mine.
Hmm.
Everyone thinks of Yukon and they think of the gold rush, but there's been a higher dollar value of zinc sold out of Yukon than gold.
Wow.
Right. So you have to kind of consider that, yeah, this historical land of the Klondike gold rush is actually in the Selwyn Basin there, where we're located, in the Faro deposit as well. That is one of the most prolific zinc districts in the world, easily.
Right. So looking ahead, and we're going to, of course, learn a lot more about this when we're all in Chicago together. But this year, I said a minute ago, you're completing this financing. What are your plans for the balance of the year and maybe into 2023 as far as added exploration and when you might be updating your resource estimate?
Yeah, we should be closing the second tranche of our financing here pretty quickly as soon as we get some paperwork back from. It's complicated. It piffs if you ever go over 10% and you got to do these information forms. So we're waiting on that, but that'll leave us with almost $20 million in the bank, which is a fantastic position to be in.
Yeah.
Certainly helps you weather the choppiness in the market a little bit better when you don't have to worry about raising money. But that's gonna, fund the biggest ever drill program this year. And that drill program is going to feed into a global sort of resource update early next year. I don't want to be too specific about when it's going to happen because labs are still slow, so we don't know,
right,
what the limiting factor in that's going to be. But let's say Q1, Q2 next year for a resource update on the project. So that'll just be not just the update on the ground we got from Hud Bay, which is the Tom and Jason deposits, but also including that new zone, the Boundary and Boundary West zone that's been so exciting lately. And then, hopefully 3 to 5 months after that, we'll be able to put out an updated preliminary economic assessment, which will cover the whole project as well. So you think about what we put out in 2018, that's nothing. Like, this is going to be a radically different project. I think we have a real possibility to double the MPV, which is no small feat, right?
No, it's not. No. Well, a lot of the stars are aligning, I think, Brandon. The world is starting to realize that we're short of all commodities. You probably listen to Jeff Curry once in a while at Goldman Sachs, and he says it doesn't matter what you look at across the board. There's been such subpar development of everything for so long that now, as we're getting into these strategic needs, infrastructure needs and so forth, there just isn't enough to go around. So an asset like this, you got to believe when you put out some updated numbers, is going to be on a lot of companies' short lists. And so that's going to be exciting. I got to find Doc Brown and borrow his DeLorean and go forward a year and find out what the number is going to be and buy some more stock.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that, the last cycle for mining was driven by the China story, right? Like their GDP growth was 8 to 10% a year. They've obviously fallen well off that. And so people might think, well, this cycle, this upcycle in the metal space may not be as big because you don't have that crazy Chinese growth. But what you have this time that you did not have last time is resource nationalism.
Yeah.
Right. So you're going to see restocking in metals. You're going to see countries set up strategic reserves like they do sometimes with oil and stuff like that. And it's going to mean inventories are going to have to be much higher than they were before, which means even more metal demand. So
closer to home.
Yeah, and you've got an underinvestment in production. So it's been happening for the last decade. So the sort of whip effect here is going to be brutal. And something specifically like zinc, copper, nickel, these are exciting metals, but zinc is unique in that it's not just the demand that's dominated by the Chinese, it's the supply as well. They represent, I think it's something like almost 30% of the mine supply, which is heavily overweight, right? Mm-hmm. So if countries like USA, Canada, Europe, et cetera, want to make sure they have these metals, it means developing projects at home.
Yeah. For sure. Well, folks, this is again one of the more exciting resource exploration plays I've ever covered. When you look at what the value here, go to Fireweed Zinc. It's fireweedzinc.com is the website.
Yep.
And check out some of this latest news. And I mean, some of these assay results that are going to eventually be incorporated, at least some of them, if not most, into a resource estimate upgrade next year. Just off the charts. It's phenomenal. This is a great story. So I'm looking forward to it and getting an update and seeing you in person, Brandon. And again, folks, for this and a number of other compelling stories in a variety of sectors, make sure that you register. Come if you can in person. If you can't make it in person, register anyway on the site at the appropriate place, and you'll be able to get all of these presentations, access to the companies and so forth virtually afterwards. So Brandon, thanks, buddy. Continue the good work, and I look forward to seeing you in about 9 or 10 days.
Yeah, see you then.